What happens in the very first second after our last breath? Is there a blinding light, a peaceful silence, or is there something else, something far more immediate, far more intense that the great mystics of the Church were shown in terrifying detail? For most of us, this moment remains the ultimate mystery, a door we all must walk through, but whose other side we cannot see. But what if someone did see? What if a saint, chosen by God, was allowed to peer through that veil, not just to see heaven or hell, but to witness the precise, shocking moment a soul arrives in purgatory? This is not a story of a near-death experience. This is a divine revelation granted to a young woman whose life was already a testament to the supernatural. Her name was Saint Gemma Galgani. In this video, we will journey into the heart of one of the most startling visions ever recorded in the life of a saint. We will uncover what Saint Gemma saw the instant a soul she knew personally was judged and sent to its purification. We will explore the sights, the sounds, and the raw spiritual reality of that moment. And most importantly, you will understand why this vision, granted to a woman who regularly spoke with Jesus and her guardian angel, shocked her so profoundly that it changed her prayers forever. What she witnessed was not what she expected. To truly grasp the magnitude of her vision, we must first understand the soul who received it. Gemma Galgani, born in a small Italian town in 1878, was no ordinary person. From her earliest childhood, she was marked by a deep, almost unexplainable connection to the spiritual world. She was a soul who seemed to live with one foot on earth and the other in eternity. Her life was a tapestry woven with threads of immense suffering and breathtaking grace. She lost her mother at a young age, faced crippling poverty, and battled a series of severe illnesses that left doctors baffled and her body in constant agonizing pain. Yet it was in this furnace of affliction that God forged one of His most remarkable mystics. Gemma wasn't just devout, she was a living portal to the divine. She is known to the world as a stigmatic, one of the few souls in history chosen to bear the physical wounds of Christ's passion. Every Thursday evening, she would fall into an ecstasy, and the sacred wounds would appear on her hands, feet, and side, bleeding profusely until Friday afternoon, a weekly participation in the suffering of her Savior. This alone would set her apart, but it was only the beginning. Her guardian angel was her constant companion, a visible and audible friend with whom she would converse, pray, and even argue. She received direct communications from Jesus and the Blessed Virgin Mary, not as vague feelings or inspirations, but as clear, intimate conversations. She was, in every sense, a citizen of two worlds. Her heart burned with a singular, all-consuming fire, an intense love for God, and a desperate desire for the salvation of souls. She offered every moment of her excruciating pain for the conversion of sinners. She understood sacrifice, she understood penance, she understood, better than almost anyone, the terrible price of sin and the infinite value of a single soul in the eyes of God. You would think, then, that a soul so familiar with spiritual realities, so accustomed to the supernatural, would be unshakable. You would think that nothing could surprise her. But you would be wrong. Because one day, God pulled back the curtain on the afterlife in a way she had never experienced before, showing her something raw, immediate, and utterly sobering. She was about to witness the fate of a soul from a religious order, a person she knew had passed away. She was prepared to pray for this soul, to offer her sufferings for its release, but she was not prepared for what God was about to show her. She was not prepared to see the first, terrifying moments of a soul's entry into the purifying fires. So what exactly did she see in that instant? What was it about this particular vision that left a soul as strong as Gemma trembling and forever changed? The answer reveals a truth about God's justice and mercy that we often forget. The answer lies not in a complex theological treatise, but in a raw, unfiltered spiritual event. The story begins on a specific day when word reached Gemma of the death of a nun in a nearby Passionist convent. This was not a stranger to her. The Passionist order was dear to Gemma's heart. She had longed to join them herself, but her poor health had always been an obstacle. She felt a deep spiritual kinship with these women consecrated to God. Upon hearing the news, Gemma did what she always did. She immediately went to her room, knelt down, and began to pray for the soul of the departed sister. In her mind, she was likely offering prayers of thanksgiving, assuming that such a pious soul, a bride of Christ, would be swiftly welcomed into the heavenly kingdom. She was preparing to commend a spirit into the hands of a loving Father. But God had a different lesson to teach her, and through her to us. As she prayed, the familiar reality of her room began to fade. This was a state Gemma knew well, the prelude to an ecstasy, a moment when the veil between heaven and earth grew thin. But this time it was different. There was an urgency, a gravity she had not felt before in this way. And then she saw it. Before her spiritual eyes appeared the soul of the very nun for whom she was praying. But the sight was nothing like the peaceful, light-filled journey she might have imagined. There was no gentle ascent, no chorus of angels. Instead, the soul was plunged into what Gemma could only describe as a sea of flames. It was suspended in a state of immense suffering, a suffering so palpable that Gemma herself felt the heat of its anguish. This was the first shock, the immediacy of it all. There was no waiting period, no gentle transition. There was the final breath on earth, the particular judgment in the blink of an eye, and the instantaneous immersion into this purifying fire. The justice of God was swift, absolute, and precise. The soul had been weighed and measured, and its need for cleansing was immediate and undeniable. But the second shock was even greater, and it struck Gemma to her very core. It was the sheer intensity of the suffering. Gemma was no stranger to pain. She lived a life of physical agony and bore the stigmata. She understood sacrifice. Yet the spiritual pain she witnessed in this soul was of a different order entirely. It was the pain of separation, the agony of seeing God's perfect beauty and yet being held back from it by the stains of one's own imperfections. It was a torment of love, a desperate longing for union that was, for a time, impossible. This was not hell. Gemma knew this instinctively. There was no despair, no hatred of God. In fact, the opposite was true. The soul accepted its state. It knew it was being cleansed, being made worthy of heaven. But this acceptance did not lessen the pain. In a strange and mysterious way, the soul's love for God was the very source of its greatest suffering. For it now understood perfectly what it was missing, and it burned with the desire to be with Him. Imagine the impact of this on a soul like Gemma. She saw a religious sister, a woman who had taken vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, a person the world would have considered holy, enduring a purification of such intensity. If this was the fate of the devout, what then awaited the lukewarm? What awaited those who lived their lives completely oblivious to the state of their souls? The vision was a terrifying glimpse into the seriousness of God's holiness and the true cost of even the smallest sins we so easily dismiss. But the vision was not over. It was not merely a silent tableau of suffering. The soul was there for a reason. It needed something from Gemma. As she stared, frozen by the sight, the soul communicated with her, not with spoken words, but in that way souls speak to one another, directly from spirit to spirit. It had a message for her and a desperate plea. Gemma could see the suffering, she could feel the urgency. But the vision was not just about the what, it was about the why. What specific faults, what hidden imperfections had anchored this dedicated soul to such a place of intense purification? The answer, which the soul itself revealed to Gemma, is a sobering warning for all of us, and it shines a light on the small things we so often overlook. The soul, shrouded in the flames of purification, communicated its plight to Gemma, and what it revealed was the very heart of the vision's shocking lesson. The reasons for its intense suffering were not grave, mortal sins. They were not acts of rebellion or malice that one might associate with such a severe penance. On the contrary, they were a collection of what we, in our worldly view, would call small things, imperfections, and minor failings. The soul revealed to Gemma that throughout her religious life she had committed several faults against her vows. Perhaps she had shown a small attachment to a comfort that broke the spirit of her vow of poverty. Perhaps she had engaged in a moment of self-will, a subtle act of disobedience that went unnoticed by her superiors but was seen perfectly by God. Other faults were even more subtle. The soul spoke of moments of vanity, of taking a small, hidden pleasure in a compliment. It spoke of slight impatience with another sister, a thought not acted upon but entertained in the heart. It confessed to performing some of her religious duties and prayers with a certain amount of lukewarmness, going through the motions without the full fire of love that God deserved. This was the source of Gemma's profound shock. These were not the transgressions of a great sinner. These were the hidden faults of a good soul, faults that many of us commit daily without a second thought. We get impatient in traffic. We feel a flicker of pride in our work. We say our prayers while our mind is a million miles away. We tell ourselves, it's just human, or God understands. But Gemma's vision ripped away that comfortable veil of self-deception. It showed her that in the piercing, holy light of God's presence, nothing is hidden. Every idle word, every selfish thought, every act of love performed with less than a perfect intention leaves a mark. It is like a speck of dust on a flawless mirror. To us, it's insignificant, but to the one who sees only perfection, that single speck mars the entire reflection. This vision unveiled for Gemma the terrifying standard of heaven, absolute purity. Not just freedom from mortal sin, but freedom from all attachment to sin, from all the lingering stains and spiritual debts that we accumulate throughout our lives. Heaven is a union with perfect love, perfect purity, and perfect holiness. To enter it, the soul itself must be made perfect. And that which is not perfected by penance and love on earth must be perfected by fire in purgatory. Suddenly, Gemma understood. Purgatory was not some optional waiting room. It was an absolute necessity, a forge of divine mercy where the soul is stripped of its last vestiges of self-love so it can be clothed in the pure love of God. The suffering she witnessed was not a punishment in the earthly sense, but a cleansing, a painful, agonizing, yet merciful process of being made beautiful enough to behold the face of God. This revelation ignited a new fire in Gemma's own soul. She began to examine her own life with a terrifying new clarity. The smallest impatience, the slightest thought of vanity, which she might have dismissed before, now appeared to her as a grave offense against the majesty of God. Her own pursuit of holiness intensified tenfold. But her vision was not just for her own spiritual growth. The soul suffering in the flames had not appeared only to teach her a lesson. It had a desperate, urgent request. It needed her help. What could a living person on earth possibly do for a soul already in the hands of God's justice? The answer reveals the incredible power that you and I hold, a power we often forget we possess. The plea from the suffering soul was simple, yet it carried the weight of eternity. It was a desperate cry for help, a direct request for Gemma to offer her prayers, her penances, and her immense physical sufferings for the relief of its purification. And this reveals one of the most beautiful and empowering doctrines of our faith, the communion of saints. Here on earth, we are the church militant. We are still in the fight, still able to choose, to pray, to sacrifice, and to grow in grace. The souls in heaven are the church triumphant, victorious, and interceding for us. But the souls in purgatory are the church suffering. Once a soul crosses the threshold of death, its time for choosing, for earning merit is over. It cannot shorten its own purification. It can only endure, being cleansed by the loving fire of God's justice. They are entirely dependent on the mercy of God, a mercy that flows through the charity of those still living. Our prayers, the Holy Mass offered for them, our small daily sacrifices, our acts of charity, all of these things have immense value in the spiritual economy. They can be applied to the souls in purgatory, like a payment offered to satisfy a debt, shortening their time of suffering and hastening their entry into heavenly glory. For a soul like Gemma, this was not a request to be considered. It was a command of love to be obeyed instantly. Her heart, already so attuned to the suffering of Christ, now felt the suffering of this member of his mystical body. She saw a soul in agony, a soul beloved by God, and her entire being moved with a desire to help. But Gemma's response went far beyond what most of us would imagine. She didn't just promise to say a few rosaries or light a candle. She did something far more radical, something that only the greatest saints, burning with a seraphic love, would dare to do. She decided to offer herself as a victim soul for this specific purpose. She went before the Blessed Sacrament and spoke to Jesus with the familiarity of a child speaking to her father, but with the courage of a warrior. In a dialogue of love and pain, she made an astonishing proposal. She asked him to transfer the suffering of that nun, the penance required to cleanse her soul, to her own body. "Let me pay her debt," was the cry of her heart. "Let me suffer in her place, so that she may go to you more quickly." This is the pinnacle of Christian charity, to willingly take upon oneself the punishment due to another. It is a direct imitation of Christ, who took upon himself the sins of the entire world. Gemma, in her small way, was asking to participate in that same redemptive work for one specific soul. And Jesus accepted her heroic offer. Almost immediately, Gemma began to experience a new and terrible intensification of her own pains. The torments of her illnesses grew sharper. She felt a spiritual desolation and a physical agony that she instinctively knew was not her own. It was a real, tangible participation in the purifying justice of God, mediated through her own suffering flesh. She was no longer just praying for the soul. She was actively paying its price. Every searing pain, every moment of exhaustion, every throb of the stigmata was now an offering with a specific destination, the liberation of the soul of that passionist nun. She had taken on the penance of another soul. She had willingly stepped into the forge. But the critical question remained: would it be enough? How long would she have to endure this vicarious suffering? And would she ever receive a sign that her sacrifice had truly been accepted and that the soul was finally free? The answer came in another series of visions, each more revealing than the last. For days, Gemma lived in this state of intensified suffering, a willing victim for the soul in purgatory. The physical and spiritual torment was relentless. Yet she did not waver. Her resolve was fueled by the memory of that searing vision and by her immense love for God, a love that could not bear the thought of another soul being separated from Him for even a moment longer than necessary. She prayed constantly, her every breath a plea for mercy.
She continued to receive visions of the suffering nun, and in each one she could perceive the state of the soul. The process was not instantaneous. It was a gradual purification, and Gemma was a privileged witness to its progress. She could see day by day how her sacrifices were being applied, like soothing balms on a burn, easing the soul's pain and making it brighter, more luminous. In these subsequent visions, the soul of the nun would appear to her, sometimes expressing its gratitude, sometimes encouraging Gemma to persevere in her offerings. It was a profound and mysterious partnership between a soul on earth and a soul in the afterlife, both working together for the glory of God. This experience taught Gemma a vital lesson about the power of intercessory prayer and vicarious suffering. It wasn't just a pious idea, it was a spiritual reality with tangible, observable effects. Then, after 16 days of this intense self-offered penance, something changed. One evening, as Gemma was in prayer, the soul of the nun appeared to her once more. But this time, everything was different. The flames were gone. The look of suffering had vanished from the soul's spiritual countenance. Instead, it was radiant, clothed in a brilliant white light, and filled with an inexpressible joy. The soul was beautiful, made perfect, and ready to enter the courts of heaven. It looked at Gemma not with a plea for help, but with a gaze of profound, eternal gratitude.
It had come to say goodbye and to thank her for her heroic act of charity that had hastened its delivery. It told Gemma that it was now going to enjoy eternal bliss with its God, and that it would never forget her in heaven. It promised to pray for her and for her family. And then, as Gemma watched, the soul ascended. Accompanied by her guardian angel and by Jesus himself, the soul rose into a light of unimaginable splendor and was absorbed into the beatific vision. The debt was paid. The purification was complete. The soul was home. For Gemma, this was a moment of immense consolation and joy, a confirmation that her terrible suffering had not been in vain. It was the fruit of her sacrifice, a soul saved from prolonged agony and brought into eternal happiness. She had witnessed the entire arc of a soul's journey, from the shocking moment of its entry into purgatory, through its painful purification, to its glorious entrance into heaven. This complete vision left an indelible mark on her. It forever changed her understanding of sin, justice, and mercy. She now understood with a terrifying clarity that every action has a consequence, and that God's holiness demands absolute purity. She also understood the immense power we have, as the church militant, to assist the church suffering. But this experience did more than just teach her a theological lesson. It gave her a new mission. From that day forward, Gemma's zeal for the souls in purgatory became one of the defining characteristics of her spirituality. She spoke of them often, prayed for them constantly, and urged everyone she knew to do the same. She referred to them as the poor souls, not because God had abandoned them, but because they were in a state of utter helplessness, completely reliant on our charity. Her vision wasn't just a private revelation for her own benefit. It was a message for the entire church. It was a wake-up call. So, what are the practical, urgent lessons that we can draw from Saint Gemma's shocking vision? How does this 19th century mystical experience speak directly to our lives, today, right here, right now? The implications are far more personal than you might think. The first and most sobering lesson from Saint Gemma's vision is the absolute seriousness of sin, especially the small sins we so easily rationalize. In our modern culture, we have lost a sense of sin. We tend to grade on a curve, comparing ourselves to others and concluding we're good enough. We dismiss impatience, gossip, vanity, or laziness as mere character flaws, not as offenses against an infinitely holy God.
Gemma's vision shatters this illusion. It shows us that God's perspective is not our perspective. In the pure light of His divine justice, every imperfection, every attachment to self, every failure to love perfectly must be accounted for. The soul of the nun was not in purgatory for murder or apostasy. She was there for failings that most of us would consider minor. This should be a profound wake-up call for each of us to take our daily examination of conscience seriously. It compels us to ask difficult questions. Where in my life am I lukewarm? When do I perform my duties, whether spiritual or secular, out of mere routine rather than a spirit of love? What are the subtle attachments to comfort, to praise, to my own opinion that I refuse to surrender to God? According to Saint Gemma's vision, these are the very things that can anchor a soul to the purifying fires. The second crucial lesson is the incredible power and responsibility we have towards the souls in purgatory. We are not helpless spectators in the drama of salvation. We are active participants. The communion of saints is real. Our prayers, sacrifices, and especially the holy sacrifice of the Mass have a direct and powerful effect on easing the suffering and shortening the purification of these souls. Gemma's experience shows that this is not just a pious hope, it is a spiritual mechanism. Our acts of charity on earth can literally pay the temporal debt of sin for those who have gone before us. This gives our daily struggles a new and profound meaning. Stuck in traffic? Offer that frustration for a soul in purgatory. Have a headache? Offer that pain for a soul. Foregoing a small pleasure like a dessert or a coffee, make it a specific offering for a deceased family member or a forgotten soul. These small acts, when united with the love of Christ, become spiritual treasures that can liberate those who are helpless to help themselves. Think about the implications.
There are likely souls of our own ancestors, friends, or neighbors who are in this state of purification, longing for heaven and relying on our prayers. Saint Gemma's vision urges us not to forget them. To have masses said for the dead is one of the greatest acts of charity we can perform. To pray the rosary for them, to offer the Divine Mercy Chaplet, to visit a cemetery and pray for the departed, these are not just old traditions, they are powerful spiritual works of mercy with eternal consequences. The third lesson is a message of profound hope and a deeper understanding of God's mercy. At first glance, the vision seems terrifying. The immediacy of the justice, the intensity of the suffering, it can be unsettling. But look deeper. Purgatory is not an extension of hell. It is the antechamber of heaven. It is a testament to God's incredible mercy. God's mercy is not a simple get-out-of-jail-free card. It is a transformative fire. He loves us so much that He will not allow us to enter His presence with any stain that would diminish our joy or our ability to receive His love fully. The pain of purgatory is the pain of being made perfect, the pain of a deep and final healing. The souls there suffer immensely, but they do so willingly, even joyfully, because they know it is preparing them for an eternity of bliss. They are the holy souls because their salvation is assured. Their suffering has a definite endpoint, the loving embrace of God. This vision, therefore, should not lead us to despair, but to a holy and reverent fear of God. A fear not of a tyrant, but a fear of offending the one we love so much. It should inspire us to live more intentionally, to strive for holiness, not just to avoid purgatory, but because we desire to be united with God as perfectly as possible, both now and in the life to come. So Gemma saw the shock of God's justice, the power of intercession, and the hope of His ultimate mercy. But how does this translate into our daily lives, beyond just prayer? How can we live in such a way that we begin our purification here on earth so that our transition into the next life is less a shock and more of a gentle passage? The saints give us a clear path.
The path the saints walk is not meant to be a spectacle for us to observe from a distance. It is a map laid out for us to follow. Saint Gemma's vision of purgatory is not just a frightening story from a mystic's diary. It is a profound and urgent call to action. It is a glimpse behind the curtain of eternity, given to us so that we might live differently here in time. It teaches us that holiness is found in the small things, in the daily battle against self-love, impatience, and vanity. It reminds us that our life on earth is the only time we have to merit grace, to grow in love, and to perform acts of charity that have eternal repercussions. This vision calls us to live with an eternal perspective, to understand that our choices today echo in the next life, not just for ourselves, but for others. We are our brother's keeper, not just in this world, but across the veil. We have been given the incredible power, through the merits of Jesus Christ, to reach into the church suffering and bring relief, comfort, and liberation to souls who are on their way to glory. This is not a burden, it is one of the greatest privileges of our faith. We are invited to participate, like Gemma, in the redemptive work of Christ Himself. The shock Gemma felt should become our sobriety. Her heroic charity should become our inspiration, and her vision of a soul entering heaven should become our ultimate hope. Turning signs into action, your practical guide in the next 24 hours. The Gemma sacrifice. Sometime today, consciously choose a small, hidden act of penance. This could be taking the stairs instead of the elevator, drinking your coffee black if you prefer it with sugar, or holding your tongue when you feel the urge to complain. In that moment of small discomfort, silently offer it up by saying in your heart, "Jesus, I offer this small suffering for the holiest soul in purgatory who is closest to entering heaven." This unites you directly with Gemma's spirit of vicarious suffering. A conscious prayer for the departed. Before you go to sleep tonight, find a quiet moment and specifically pray for the souls of your own deceased family and friends. Don't just think of them in passing.
Their names aloud. Then pray the simple but powerful eternal rest prayer for them. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. May their souls and the souls of all the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen. Envision your prayer as a drop of cool water on a soul thirsting for God. In the next 7 days, a pilgrimage of mercy. Sometime this week, make a visit to a Catholic cemetery. This is a powerful tradition in the Church. Walk slowly among the graves, especially in the older, more forgotten sections. You don't need to know the people buried there. Offer a rosary or a Divine Mercy chaplet as you walk, with the specific intention for the most forgotten soul in that cemetery, the one who has no one left on earth to pray for them. This is an immense act of spiritual charity. The chain of mercy. Commit to praying the Divine Mercy chaplet every day for 7 days for a specific intention related to purgatory. For example, you could offer it for all priests and religious currently in purgatory on Monday, for your grandparents on Tuesday, for victims of war on Wednesday, and so on. This creates a consistent chain of grace and makes your intercession a deliberate and focused part of your week. In the next 30 days, the ultimate offering, the Holy Mass. The most powerful prayer we can offer for any soul is the holy sacrifice of the Mass. Within this month, go to your local parish office and arrange to have a Mass said for the deceased members of your family, or simply for the holy souls in purgatory. When you attend that Mass, consciously unite your own prayers with the infinite merits of Christ's sacrifice on the altar, asking God to apply those graces to the souls most in need. The Mirror of Perfection. Inspired by the small faults that kept the nun in purgatory, conduct a more detailed examination of conscience once a week for the next month. Don't just focus on big sins. Use a journal and ask yourself, where was I vain this week? When was I impatient? Did I perform my duties with love or just to get them done? Was I attached to my own comfort or opinion?
This practice helps you begin your purification now, on earth, with love and penance, rather than leaving it for the fires of purgatory. The veil between this life and the next is thinner than we think, and our love is the bridge that crosses it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next revelations. Comment on what you thought of this video and what city you are watching us from. Share this with someone who needs to know this message.